I'm going to talk about 4 different points in regards to this, and excellent question. I think about it a lot because I'm often called to collaborate in tough situations with kids and bring social workers together, and we don't always see eye to eye. So this is a great wish list for me as I'm talking to you, to students in social work. I think number 1 is, like I said earlier, it's critical that we as social workers think about children as not what's happening on a face value, but really understand what we kind of hypothesize, if you will, what's the core issues that this child is facing and what's underneath their behavior. And that creates a hypothesis for us from which to decide what are we going to do next. If we don't form a hypothesis, if we just kind of respond to what we're seeing, we lose an ability to think critically about this child in the context of their culture, their environment, their developmental needs, their family system, and that it takes us on directions that become, frankly, dangerous because we have a lot of influence in children's lives, particularly people within the county social service systems. You're making decisions that impact children's lives perhaps for the rest of their childhood. And so we have to take this very seriously, step back and be flexible and curious. So this idea of what's the core issue, we're thinking what's behind the behavior. We're thinking what is this child's developmental path right now? What are their needs, emotional needs that are being met? And I could give a couple examples of that. I mean, just on the face value, why is a child running away all the time? An adolescent who's called into, she's got a juvenile probation officer, she's in the foster care system, and why is it that every time she gets into what seems to be a pretty good foster placement, she's often running again? Why is that? I would urge you to ask, what's her developmental task at age 13? What's her attachment history? And you're going to hear me talk a lot about, it behooves us to know about what attachment is. It is a critical variable in kids' lives. What I mean by that is that children, particularly children, all of us, but children need partnerships with adults to allow them to develop in the most beneficial way, to learn the rules of society, to learn how to live within their community, culturally, to understand how they can be who they are in relation to others, and internally, how they organize their thoughts and emotions going on inside. All of those happen in relationship. So as I'm thinking of one young lady that I've been working with who's 15 and infuriating the system right now because of her chronic running behavior, I got her to understand that she has this deep longing inside to find her birth mother. And every foster home she gets in, she'll find something wrong with it and need to go return to kind of this hope and this dream inside of finally it's a fantasy, but in being in sync with this parent that she's never stopped dreaming about. And unless we understand that, we're never going to be able to kind of speak her language to help her come up with some other solutions. So attachment being another key lens in that core issue. The second point would really be around attachment, to understand some of the core, well-researched components of attachment patterns. That we're looking at, those 4 patterns of secure attachment that are borne out through 30 years of research right here at the University of Minnesota, whether that's secure, ambivalent, avoidant pattern, all those are insecure patterns, and then the disorganized pattern, which are the traumatized response. You can understand a lot about kids' behavior if you're thinking about those 4 components, and their parents, because we've often saw that parents' patterns of attachment then gets reflected in children's pattern, and it helps then we understand how we work with parents more effectively, which I should have put on my list actually, because that's a key component as well. Children are never in isolation, and to serve them well, we have to figure out how we are thinking equally curious in a larger hypothesis about their parents. So attachment gives us that lens. I should say one thing about that lens, though. We've got to form our hypothesis, and then we've got to think critically if we get new information. We've got to be flexible about that hypothesis. And sometimes I think the pressures of just trying to act on behalf of this child and what you've seen can lead to sometimes some blindness and an ability to kind of just stick to one point of view without being willing to, again, open up that lens, like the camera I'm talking in front of, and think more complexly about what's going on with that child. We've got to step back, we've got to think in an integrative, flexible manner about what's happening and go back to kind of articulate what we think are the core developmental, emotional tasks facing that child. So let that flexibility guide you. I think the third one, that I'll tell you, this is from the kids I've worked with, is be willing to be a human being with kids. You've got an important role, but don't let that role take away your basic component, your basic ability to connect with kids. Be curious about them. Track who they are, what their likes, their dislikes are. See them as real people. You know, I think of kids who have talked about social workers that have been important in their life. And some of them have said, you know, I've had the same social worker on the ward of the state since I was 7 years old, and now I'm 17. And this person knows me better than anyone in my entire life. They have walked with me through all these changes. And that's a valuable relationship to them. They don't always agree, they can lots of debates, but there's an element of respect that I've seen kids extend to workers who are willing to respect the child. And I don't always see that happening. I think we get so busy with the casework demands and paperwork demands and legal demands of the role that we forget to take time to form a relationship with this kid. And they're watching us all the time. So, and that's probably the most delightful part of the job as well. So enjoy children, is what I want to say. And the last would be don't work in isolation. Because we live in the area of gray, which means that we're not putting together widgets to form a mechanical object. We are trying to make very difficult judgment calls all the time about what we see. In very imperfect reporters. Our kids lie to us. They do, because if I have a brain, they're going to say whatever they think the person across from them needs to hear. So they're not reliable reporters of what's going on and what they need. Parents are not reliable reporters. We have a lot of discerning to do about what's the truth. And so, at least how I answer that is that I don't always have to know. What I have to do is be, again, open, curious, and flexible, and willing to talk around the table about what do you see, what do you see, what do you see, so that reality is somewhere in between. And then based on that collaboration, then what does this child need, really what is in the child's best interest, and that will guide you.